Miami is showing no indication that they want to be anywhere but the ACC no matter what.
You are Locked On College Football, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in the greatest sport on planet Earth. Realignment, coaching carousel, the portal, and more. Get you ready for the season, which is very close, less than 40 days away. We've always got you covered. Today's episode brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. I am not alone today. Alex Donno, Locked On Canes, joining me here to discuss. Should be able to get Yogi Roth later on today's show as well. We'll talk about Michigan State, what Jonathan Smith had to say at Big Ten Media Days, where I am. Alex Donno is down at ACC Media Days. Let's talk Miami here, Donno, because they continue to be very quiet. And when they do make any semblance of noise or have comments regarding Miami's future conference realignment, kind of seems like no matter what happens, they want to stay in the ACC.
Yeah, I mean, all the public indications are that. Now, there's two ways you can react to that. Number one would be they're saying that, but do they really mean it? Maybe they don't want to be, like Brett McMurphy said in his report about Florida State last week, maybe they don't want to be a quote-unquote disruptive partner. Maybe they don't want to publicly rock the boat. But at the same time, I would say the most that Mario Cristobal said about it today, and of course he's not the one who makes that decision, right? That if conference realignment were to happen for Miami, that decision would come from the president's office to the athletic director on down. But Cristobal was asked today about the revenue gap, right, between the ACC, who's obviously looking up at the Big Ten, and the SEC. And his comments to me were very interesting because the way that Cristobal addressed that question was pointing out that Miami's a private institution, and his words, they do very well, implying the finances do very well. So you get the sense that, and Cristobal said this, he's not maybe as worried about the revenue gap from a Miami point of view as some of the other schools in the ACC clearly are, and some of the state schools clearly are. So that's pretty much the most we've gotten publicly. When Miami's athletic director has spoken in the past, he's been very pro-ACC, and like you said, Spencer, Miami has given no public indication otherwise.
Do you think that's wise? Do you think that, let's say that is their mentality, we are staying in the ACC even if Florida State and Clemson leave. Can Miami get to a consistent playoff and national championship level in that conference? I think the playoff aspect is the easier question to answer, because if you win your conference, you're still going to have an auto bid. I don't think post FSU and Clemson, which will be 2026 at the earliest, if they are in fact able to get out of the grant of rights, I don't think the ACC loses its auto bid. Not as long as the Big 12 has got an auto bid, because they are going to be on very similar footing, assuming Florida State and Clemson, as I do presume, wind up in the Big Ten or the SEC. But can Miami and the ACC put together a sort of schedule where they get big-time national respect and, they can go 10-2 maybe and still make the playoff? Or can they, have enough money with the ACC's media deal to compete for a national championship? Are those goals attainable?
I would question that, and I'm with you. I'm from where I sit, I'm very concerned about that stuff, especially given how much stronger the Big Ten just got, how much stronger the SEC has just gotten, and then you have to wonder, within a matter of a few years, Clemson and Florida State likely to join one of those conferences. I would probably see less interest on the side of teams in the Big Ten and the SEC in scheduling big non-conference games. I think they would probably focus more on the conference schedule. I know from the SEC side, there's even been some chatter about adding a 9th conference game, and if that were to happen, they would probably not be as bullish on the non-conference. So I think you've outlined, from where I sit covering Miami, that would be my biggest fear, that yes, you would for the foreseeable future have the contractual tie-in to the college football playoff, which is a great opportunity, and you would, theoretically have an easier route through the ACC than you would through the Big Ten or the SEC. So that would give you an opportunity to be a perennial playoff team. We're at 12 teams. We're going to be at 14 teams in a couple of years. But then at the same time, as this college football, whether they call it that or not, is shifting more towards like a Super League scenario with the SEC and the Big Ten on top, you would have to wonder, teams that are, left behind in the Big 12 and the ACC, would they be on an even playing field? But even if you could produce finances privately to bridge some of that financial gap, can you bridge the competitive gap? Exactly. Yeah. Is it enough, and can you bridge the competitive gap?
Mario Cristobal was not just asked about Miami's future conference realignment, because as you know, and as I've stated for a long time, presidents vote on realignment. I make that motion because it's going on my gravestone one day. And Mario Cristobal spoke about the upcoming season, where he's got the biggest expectations that he has had going into his third year in Coral Gables. What were your takeaways from what the Miami head coach had to say?
He seems to have a belief in the cultural turnaround, and he'll always say it's still a work in progress. I mean, one of the lines Cristobal has had since he took over was, it took more than a couple of years to turn Miami into what they have been in recent years in a negative light, and it's going to take more than a couple of days or even a couple of years to turn Miami back into what it used to be or what Mario Cristobal wants it to be. But at the same time, now that he's got 2 full recruiting classes in, he had a top 10 class of 2023 and a top 5 class of 2024 that's arrived now as true freshmen, and Miami has made some impactful moves in the transfer portal. He seems to believe in the roster in a way that I haven't quite seen, and it's really just a matter of these guys kind of playing in sync with one another. I had a chance not only to speak with Mario Cristobal today, but also to speak with Cam Ward, with Kiko Maui-Noa, who was Miami's top linebacker last year, and starting left tackle Jalen Rivers. And these guys are all very humble. I mean, they're aware of the expectation, and they're aware of how good the team looks on paper, but they understand that they have to go out there and actually prove it and silence the noise. And I think that was one of the big emphasis from Cristobal today. And Cristobal also, he speaks glowingly about Cam Ward. I mean, you can tell that he's blown away not only by what he can do out there physically, but he's also blown away by Ward's professionalism, as Ward has done a really good job since he's been at Miami. He arrived back in January of team building, doing a lot of off-schedule workouts to go along with the spring football he was doing. And so Mario seems cautiously optimistic, not to put words in his mouth, but he seems like he's pretty optimistic about what type of a team Miami can have this year.
I want to get you out of here on this. More important in-state game for Miami. Week 1 against Florida, starting 1-0 instead of 0-1, or the midseason matchup with Florida State?
I'm going to say Florida State because if I were to say Florida, and it is a huge game, obviously, but people can talk about setting the tone early in the year. Miami, we thought, set the tone early last year, beating Texas A&M third week of the season, which was the first real opponent they had. They played, a couple of lesser foes the first 2 weeks. And so with that big win against Texas A&M, people thought, is that going to be the tone setter for the rest of the season? It was not. And obviously Texas A&M maybe not as good as people thought that they were heading into that year. So people can look at the Florida game and say the same thing. I'm always going to say the Florida State game is the more important game, not only because it, could decide whether or not you play for an ACC championship this year, being the conference game. Florida State's had Miami's number for the last few years in that rivalry, and I really think that's the one, because we've seen Miami start season strong. We haven't seen them finish season strong, and with that game being towards the latter part of the year, I think that's the one that I have circled.
Alex Donno, Locked On Canes, Locked On ACC as well. A home run of a guest as always. Donno, appreciate the time.
Thanks, Spencer. Have a great day.
Lincoln Riley spoke here in Indianapolis. How ready can that defense be? What does that defense need to be? That is coming up next. Before we get to that, we're getting to Game Time, which is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. They've got killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets, which is better for you. You can save up to 60% buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, whatever you're looking for. You can save even more with exclusive in-app deals ahead of the game or event. Game Time is the place to be. Take the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app. Create an account. Use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account. Redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. Locked On College. All one word for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Some would say the sharpest dressed man in college football. Joining me here on the show, Yogi Roth, now of the Big Ten Network, formerly the Pac-12 Network, so only fitting that we talk about USC here. Lincoln Riley took the stage. Your reaction to what you heard from the Trojans head coach going into year 3?
Okay, I got to start with you, though, bro. I've watched you grow and grow and
Thank
grow.
you.
And every time I see you on, like, Canzano's podcast or something, I'm like, these wins you're getting. So I'm just so happy for you.
Thank you.
We talked early on in your journey, and to see where you are now, I can't wait to catch up off the interview. I know we got questions to do and business to handle, but for you and your listeners and those following you, like, you have busted your tail.
Thank you.
And it's recognized and seen by many of us in the media, man. So keep it moving.
Will do.
Just
always.
like USC's going to keep it moving. Right, little transition.
That's a smooth transition.
Yeah, look, I think I net out here with them. They're taking a lot of shrapnel, part of the job. But I don't understand why it's coming now. So, okay, why? After last season, we confirmed what we all know. USC's going to score points under Lincoln Riley. They're going to move the ball. Miller Moss is going to be able to be the dude. I mean, look at the history of everybody who's been his starter, who he said, you're going to be the guy. Caleb 2 years in a row. I think it's 42, 30-some touchdowns. You look at what Kyler did, 40-some touchdowns, Heisman, Jalen, 30-some touchdowns. Like, he's going to ball. We know that. Defensively, they made all the changes you could ask for. They bring in Danton Lynn, who did, miraculous things at UCLA. They bring in Eric Henderson, who's tracking in the league to come coach D-line at USC, leaving the Rams. You bring in Matt Enns, who is thriving as a head coach, to come to USC, and Doug Belk, who has called defensive plays in the NFL. Like, what else do you want, man?
Yeah.
Like, they've done that. So they're going to be better there. I think from a roster standpoint, I think they'll be better too. I think fundamentally, they're recruiting high school at the level that I think USC should, instead of the first 2 years was just pieced together via the portal, especially on the offensive defensive fronts, and especially defensively in the front seven where they struggled stopping the run.
And I still think their high school recruiting has got another gear.
No doubt.
Yeah.
So why am I netting out with all this? I'm saying it's a foundational year for USC. Not a year 1, not a year 0. We've heard all these phrases before. It's a foundational year because they're set. I mean, they had the best player my eyes have ever seen at quarterback the last 2 years in college football.
Yeah.
For whatever that's worth. And they had to take a run at it. And they did their first year, and they struggled, of course, last year. So I think it's a foundation to give them a shot to go play games, because they did everything that every fan wanted them to do. And then my last thing is in recruiting, where the fan base can get frustrated. But we just lost a couple of kids from Georgia. Like, of course, the game is different now. The leveraging in recruiting is different now. So I think I go back to what I know, which is my time at SC. How do we recruit? We recruited California, mostly Southern California bakes from San Diego, and then we left for a first-round pick. And I think there's something to that ideology of, like, go get the best players in your backyard and then dip out for a Brian Cushing. See if you can take a run at a Patrick Turner, a Dwayne Jarrett, like one of those monsters, Keith Rivers, out of state. So I believe that this thing is on its way to being a monster again. It's just not going to happen as fast as everybody wants, and that's why I think the criticism needs to just tamper a little bit.
Well, I think the criticism comes from the expectations that got set in his first year.
Yeah.
You come into Los Angeles, it's a big splashy hire. Yeah. He's got the track record, and he goes 11-1. He's in the Pac-12 championship game, right? And then year 2 comes around, and it's a massive disappointment. I mean, they start 6-0. They go 1-5 down the stretch at the University of Southern California. That's incomprehensible. That shouldn't happen, right? But then here's where I have been in the pro USC camp. Far be it from me to be a USC homer, according to many of you out there, but where I come down on the pro USC side of this season is for the last several years, a lot of people have, fans, media, whoever, have begged Lincoln Riley, get rid of Alex Grinch, make a change, make an investment. And you just listed all the investments that they made. So they hire 3 new coaches. They bring in a bunch of sweet players like Easton Mascarenas Arnold and Achille Arnold from Oregon State, who were players on a real good defense last year, or Kamari Ramsey from UCLA. Like, they're bringing over guys. They've brought over the coaching. Look at the jumps that UCLA's defensive metrics made in 1 year with D'Anton Lynn as the DC. There's going to be some improvement. They might not be a top 20 defense, but is that what we were asking for last year from USC? No, can you be top 40? Can you be top 50? And I think they can.
Yeah, they're going to be better. Like, can, Abe Lucas coming off the edge, can he be a beast? right? Or Anthony Lucas, excuse me.
Yeah, Anthony Lucas.
I'm thinking of the old lineman for the Seahawks. Can
That
he
dude
be,
is a
can he be the
beast.
5-star recruit that he was coming out? Can Bear Alexander be a true game wrecker? Like, there's some fair questions, but they have enough players to be competitive in this league. It'll be a challenge, though, right? LSU, which way that game goes. We know what LA and the media can do and what it's already done with SC. So we'll see. They win that game, which they're very capable of doing, and they'll tamper and cool and calm the dogs a little bit. If they lose, it'll be what it is at USC and in LA. But I'm not selling on USC by any stretch of the imagination. You talk to players, you go to practice, you watch the tape. I think this thing is trending in the right direction. I also thought, I think I was the only one in the media that picked them to finish 4th in the league last year. And it wasn't because...
It was not a popular pick at the time. They're off an 11 year. Caleb Williams is back.
But if you, like, and I'm not saying you didn't, but, like, the scope of last year's league, like, you just knew.
It was deep.
It was ridiculously deep. And they had to play everybody. They didn't get to miss Oregon and UW.
Right.
So I just think I'm a big fan of context. That's why I started Y Option, college football through the lens of the West Coast. Because I think oftentimes we hear people screaming. We did. Paul Feinbaum was literally screaming on television about USC. Not an example for anybody who's trying to be you or trying to be him. Like, this is not how you do it. So I just think that we need to have thoughtful dialogue, which means, like, take a pause. Let's assess it. Let's evaluate it. Let's give it a little context. Let's analyze it. And then, okay, like, have a strong opinion. Like, yeah, defense wasn't good enough. They made the change there. We all saw it. Coach Riley saw it. He gave that defensive staff every opportunity. But they also didn't have a first-round pick on that defense. Like
right.
They didn't have Liatu
Latu
coming off the edge or the Murphy twins coming off the edge. So again, context is a thing that I think is lost, which is fine because that's what college football is. There's none.
Yeah. On the other side of the ball, we'll wrap with this. Miller Moss, I think, is really, really fascinating because he reminds me, I'm a Seahawks fan personally, he reminds me of Matt Flynn.
Ooh.
Okay? I saw one game from the guy. He went for over 400 yards. So the belief is there because he had this one big, great game. And you look at Lincoln Riley's track record with quarterbacks, it's the best in college football in the last 20 years, maybe even longer than that, producing number one picks and Heisman Trophy winners. Miller Moss, though, is different from what USC's had at quarterback the last couple of years, right? He's not Caleb Williams. That doesn't mean he can't be great or average over 300 yards passing per game. I think he is a little bit more in kind of the Baker Mayfield mold, where he's not a supremely mobile guy, could move a little, but his best work is going to come from the pocket, whereas Caleb Williams, it felt like his best work came outside the pocket. How do you think that changes USC's offense this year?
I think it'll have a chance to be dramatically efficient, if not more efficient. I mean, Caleb's wow plays were as good as any of us have ever seen.
Oh, they were crazy.
Right? His second, third reaction plays, meaning like first reaction is you hit the top of your drop, ball's out. Second reaction is I move a little bit. Third reaction is I move a lot. Right? He was a magician. Like, literally, that was his nickname at times for you at USC, and he was brilliant in that regard. Miller is going to be like Jared Goff. Miller has to win from here up.
Yeah.
Right? He has to win from here up, and he can. He's so cerebral. And he understands defenses. I mean, he's going to, this isn't the air raid that we fell in love with at Texas Tech with Mike Leach in terms of truly a pure progression offense. Leach, God bless him, he would always say, I don't want you to be a coverage scientist. That's not what this offense is. Like, you have to understand and see it. What's happening in front of you? Can you see it in slow motion? He's going to thrive there. And I think the most underrated storyline in 2 days here is when people talk about receivers, they're not talking about USC. Jacoby Lane, I think, is going to be a all-conference player. Deuce Robinson is going to ball this year. We know what Zachariah Branch is because of what he did a year ago.
And by the way, Zachariah Branch had just over 300 yards receiving last year, right? His biggest impact was in the special teams
early
game,
in the season,
right in the return game. If he's healthy for an entire year, that's a 1,000-yard receiver.
It's got a shot. I just say that of like there's weapons, and he's a guy that's going to get it out on time. I think the second thing about him, he reminds me of Cody Kessler in terms of his leadership traits. Cody Kessler had to navigate a lot as the captain and the face of that team, and that was a lot when it was going on with Steve Sarkisian, when Clay Helton ended up becoming the interim. Like, he saw a lot in his career. I think Miller isn't going to see chaos in that regard, but there's so much shrapnel coming. Like, he's dealing with it in that regard, especially in this new culture in college athletics with NIL, with the portal, with realignment. I just think he's got a stabilizing, like, steadiness to him. Like, he really does. Like, he's going to be, I think, He's not going to be like the best player to ever play quarterback at USC. I'm not going to project him to win a Heisman, but he's going to be dramatically effective. I think incredibly successful because he's going to have answers to the test. He's not going to walk into a game, whether it's at the road at Michigan, and say, whoa, I didn't see that coming. Maybe he'll get caught early, but then he'll make an adjustment. And I love that about his game on a bunch of levels. I think his demeanor is going to be great. I think his offense will be one that will be incredibly efficient this season. If they could run the football a little bit, which I think they should. We'll see what happens on this offensive front. They can run the football, which, what's the running back situation going to be like? How's it going to play out in training camp? And you look at how Lincoln Riley has ran the ball in terms of the movement on the offensive line. How does that slow down a Michigan pass rush? How does that slow down some of these opponents they're going to have to play in new venues, on the road, in hostile environments? Something that I'll definitely be watching as games go on.
Yogi Roth, Big Ten Network guy, has been a machine all day here at Big Ten Media Days. I mean, non-stop interviews everywhere, and we appreciate you taking the time, man.
Yeah, just follow Ashley, whatever she does.
Just follow her around. Michigan State, how big of a struggle is that season going to be? Is it a struggle? That's coming up next. How rough could this year be for Michigan State? Matt Sheehan of Locked On Spartans joining me here on the show. So, what's the floor? What's the worst season Michigan State could possibly have this year, Matt?
I look right to the schedule when I hear that question. Just on baseline, no matter how bad of a team you are, you look at the first month, it's Florida Atlantic, Maryland, Prairie View A&M, and then Boston College. You go to the last 4 games of the season, it's Indiana, Illinois, Purdue, and Rutgers. Those aren't necessarily haymakers, teams that are going to be in this 12-team playoff. However, I did leave out 4 games. I did leave out Ohio State, your Oregon Ducks, Iowa, and Michigan. Those 4 teams are in the top 5 of the preseason Big Ten poll, so it's going to be a tough middle. But even in your worst, you can manage 4 wins, 5 wins. Right now, the over-under in Vegas is at 4.5. I'm a little more optimistic than Vegas is having us right now, so I would just on the schedule alone, I like that as the floor right now. Are there issues with this team? Let's not get it twisted. Yes, there are. There's some depth issues on the offensive line, the defensive line. Coach Smith kind of alluded to that today at Big Ten Media Days with the offensive line. But everywhere else, you know what? Sure, I know all the headlines were saying, Michigan State lost a bunch to the transfer portal. But not a lot of people want to talk about what we got in the transfer portal. We added a high floor to our secondary. We added a great quarterback. We added a great tight end. So I think it's going to be actually a decent season if they're healthy. And a lot of the health depends on this offensive line because, we're going to want to keep Aiden Childs and all of his 4 limbs functioning the entire season. So stay tuned to see how that's going to work out for us, Spencer.
Indeed I shall, because this is Locked On College Football, and once the season gets here, I don't plan on tuning out until the off-season, quite the opposite, as a matter of fact. But let's talk about what Jonathan Smith said here in Indianapolis. My overall takeaway, Matt, was he didn't say much. He really wasn't even that loquacious with his comments. He's never been, the biggest talker or the greatest quote or anything. It looks like that's carrying over into East Lansing. He knows what answers he wants to give, but he gives pretty standard ones. And for the most part, I just kind of felt it was, the same old Jonathan Smiths we've kind of come to know, where, he says something, it's very quick, and a reporter might spend 10 seconds asking a question, and he might spend 20 seconds answering it, and then he's going on to the next one.
He's concise, he's professional, and really that kind of sets the tone for Michigan State in their next chapter right now. And that's something
he's also, as we record, literally walking like 20 feet right over there. So I hope he didn't hear me.
Can you tell us that offended? By the way?
Yeah. I'll pass that along. I think that's as professional as it gets, by the way.
Good. Excellent. No problem. So, look, he is concise. He is short with most of his answers. But, before the Big Ten Media Day started, we said that you can't get a lot out of Media Days most of the time. But Michigan State has had a lack of identity the last few years, whether it's on the field, whether it's off the field. Us Michigan State fans, we've heard it the last 8 months, ever since his tenure started, but this was a chance for him to show the conference who he is and who Michigan State is going to be here. So I hope, in a way, that this clean, concise professionalism at the podium can go to the football field. You watch Oregon State the last few years, you can certainly see the DNA of that. So, yes, he is short, and what he is also, though, is like it could have got a lot worse. It could have been Deshaun Foster, not to, absolutely bury the guy even more than he has been buried on social media.
Ouch. Matt firing shots across the bow, but
I don't feel good about it. I know public speaking can be hard for some people, but like you say all the time.
I don't think that was his problem.
No one never loses Big Ten media days. How can you lose a media day? And it's like, well, I'm glad my coach followed him because he looks great right now compared to that. So.
Yeah. No, I agree. And like it is kind of a, media days, just don't lose it because then you don't want perceptions to be negative. Deshaun Foster lost media days. I think that's
tough.
That was a tough look. I mean, the benefit of the doubt thought would be he didn't know he had to give an opening statement, in which case his SID failed him. If he did know and that's what he had prepared, that's not the best image to project. But Jonathan Smith, thankfully for Michigan State fans, doesn't have those sorts of problems. Yeah. One thing I want to talk to you about, Matt, the running game. This is a huge part of what Jonathan Smith teams really just the one team that he's been the head coach for. But even you go back to his time as his offensive coordinator at Washington, they run the football. They are more traditional. They'll go under center. And Smith talked about the running backs and the sort of playmaking that they bring to the room.
We liked his physicality, his production he's already had. I think it was a nice change up to maybe a little bit different than Nate's skill set, and so having some difference there in the backfield. Maturity, but wanted to have an opportunity for a year to play at the biggest and the best. And he's been working since he's got here. I know he's excited about the opportunity.
Yeah, it's a big cliche here at Michigan State, and as it is with a lot of different programs out there, but physicality, pound green pound was a slogan that was thrown around many years ago. We got to get back to that, and he said as much too, and you've also seen it at his time at Washington and Oregon State, that he lays the foundation with his run game. I'm high on the running backs that they have. I know it was a very tough season for them last year, especially Nate Carter going the last 10 games of the season, finding the end zone as many times as me and you did, Spencer. It was tough. I'm not going to throw all that on Nate Carter. I'm not even going to throw most of it on Nate Carter. He was helpless, thanks to an offensive coordinator that made every single play call as predictable as the sun rising in the east. And also the offensive line was last year. So he's got a good running mate too, which can only help. K'Ron Lynch-Adams out of UMass, 1,000+ yard rusher for the Minutemen over there. They're two guys that are very similarly built. It's not like a lightning and thunder situation where, hey, you got your bowling ball of a guy, you got your flashy quick guy. It's wrecking ball and wrecking ball with these two guys around 6 feet, a little over 200 pounds. So yes, I think that the running game will have a resurgence here. We'll see how much it is going to be in year one because, I can't say it enough. I say it on my show all the time. The starting offensive line, you feel okay about that. Only have one guy in the two deep, though, that has any college experience in Dallas Fincher. So injuries are part of football. Jonathan Smith even said it during this press conference today. Yeah, we'll see how it looks if we have to get into the backups here moving on this season.
Speaking of his press conference, I had the chance to ask Jonathan Smith about building a program as he did at Oregon State and also about Michigan State's quarterback, Aiden Childs. Here's what he had to say.
Some similarities, I guess, coaching transition mid-season in that. And then, but again, I go back, this is a new season. And however the previous season went, really good or really not well, this is going to be a new season, new direction that we're focused on, moving forward. And that's a similar message from both places.
For Aiden Childs, the experience he got last year at Oregon State, how helpful is that going into his first full year as a starter?
Yeah, it's helpful. Experience, you can't recreate game experience, and so he got some, and that'll be helpful. And now in the same scheme, we're hoping it really helps.
What do you think is the biggest step in his development that you want to see going into this year?
Some of the experience, more and more playing a true game, in and out of series, right? Play the series and then get back out there, adjustments. I just want to make sure that he's having fun playing the game. I think he's at his best when he's having some fun and enjoying the game of football.
What do you expect from Aiden Childs this year? Because this is freshman-ish. I think that's the best way to describe it. Like, he's played in actual games that mattered. It was a unique situation last year where, I think Smith was planning for the long term if he was going to stay at Oregon State by keeping Childs interested, by getting him playing time. I think if he'd sat on the bench, he would have gotten offers to go elsewhere because he was such a big recruit. But He doesn't have to worry about that anymore. He's the future of Michigan State. I think you roll him out and let him battle through 2 and 3 or 4 interception games if he has them. I don't expect them, but I think you let him just learn. Like this to me is a house money year for Jonathan Smith. Call some trick plays. Let your young quarterback grow in the system. There shouldn't be big expectations this year. If you make a bowl game, great, but I don't think you need to in order to feel good, especially when you look at the way that he built up Oregon State.
Yeah, it's tough to tamper expectations for Aiden Childs, and I know I'm part of the problem because we've been hyping him up all off season. But what does he offer just right off the bat here? And like, I know that Locked On doesn't like harsh language, but we're going to use that F word again, Spencer. The floor. This floor is getting way higher than it was last year. With
don't tell Zach. I won't tell Zach if you don't. That's our boss.
Might have just lost a sponsor too, but that's okay. But no, this is a floor-raising quarterback. Gave it a few tries last year with 4 different quarterbacks, and it was tough at times. What I also think helps is this isn't your typical transfer quarterback where he's learning a new system, going to a new offensive coordinator, new head coach. No, they all came over as a trio package. And yes, it was just 90-some snaps last year in Corvallis. But it's a whole offseason where you're not relearning everything. I mean, yes, there is still a learning gap with your receivers, the chemistry you build with all of them. But as far as the system goes, it's solid. Now, let's just keep him healthy and upright for 12 games because, yes, I know that, hey, you know what, may or may not expect a bowl game. But I think if he is healthy, the floor is high enough for him just as a dual-threat quarterback with all the physical traits he has that makes him better than what we've seen the last few years. I could see a bowl game and would even expect a bowl game if he stays healthy the entire season.
Matt Sheehan, Locked On Spartans. IB Spencer McLaughlin, Locked On College Football. Matt, appreciate the time. Enjoyed it as always.
Appreciate you, Spencer. You're the man.
Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. And until then, hope you have a most wonderful rest of your day.